Hi, I'm Amy.
I'm Laura.
And we are Two Paper Girls.
Today we have a slightly different video for you. We thought we would do something that will help people who are new to Booktube, because we have family and friends that watch our videos and they don't know what's going on. So we thought we would do some Booktube jargon, like decoded. We're going to tell you what all these weird phrases mean, basically.
Because when we started Booktube, I was like, what's TBR?
Yeah.
What's a wrap-up? I didn't know.
No one
and it felt like
explains
a little
it.
weird, like... It didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Getting into it. It was hard to get into.
Yeah,
so
no
hopefully
one
this will help.
explains it. You just have to watch enough that you eventually figure it out for yourself. So we thought we'd do this video for you today.
So let's get straight into it. The first one we're going to explain is YA. YA is just a genre called young adult fiction. It's basically all contemporary novels that are written for young adults like us.
Yeah, basically, but that is quite an obvious one, but I still think it can be confusing when you first hear it. Everyone's just like, oh, I'm reading lots of YA this month. You're like, what the hell does that mean? YA is the first pretty obvious one. Number 2 is TBR. You'd hear this one a lot, especially around the end of the month. And that is because it means to be read. So this is when someone will say, here's all the books I want to read this month. So TBR is to be read. It's a little bit of a weird abbreviation. It doesn't quite make sense, but it's quite easy to say. It rolls off the tongue.
Wrap up is another phrase you might hear towards the end of the month. It's basically all the books you've read in one month and you're wrapping up the month and putting a little bow on it and saying this is what I read in that month.
Number 4 is another one you might hear around the end of the month, and that is a haul. People will say, here's my book haul. It doesn't have to be a book haul, it can be a clothes haul, a month haul. It's basically where people show off things that they bought that month. So you tend to see it on Booktube, people do a book haul where they'll be like, here's the 10 books I bought, and they'll go through them and explain them and things like that.
And close related to that is number 5, which is an unhaul. Basically when you have a book buying problem, as Miss Collins does here,
Yeah.
she has so many books and she's not going to read some of them after she's had them for years and years. So we do an unhaul, and it's basically when we get rid of books, whether we take them to charity shops or we just give them out like we did in Laura's last unhaul, and you just unhaul them, get rid of them.
Number 6, we're going to start going into some genres now. The first one is contemporary, which Amy actually said whilst describing YA. But contemporary is basically a genre where it's based in real life events. So with the YA, young adult genre, that tends to be teenagers, it'd be like a high school, real friend problem. There's no fantasy, no weirdness. It's like this is how it's kind of like a real life, real true story. It's a contemporary book like John Green or Rainbow Rowell, books like that.
The next genre is high fantasy. There's lots of different fantasy ones, and we'll come to that in a minute. But high fantasy is basically your Lord of the Rings, your Throne of Glass, all of the worlds where they could have languages, they could be set in different places that aren't actually real, like an entire world set up. But that's not has any relation to the one at the minute, because Harry Potter, you could argue it's high fantasy from the description I just gave. The way the Muggle Girls integrated into that kind of means it's not high fantasy.
Yeah, I'd say Harry Potter is more of a flat fantasy. If you wanted a basis to start with, like Harry Potter, Narnia, they're just fantasy. Then you have high fantasy, which is like dragons and wizards and every single fantasy trope you can think of is high fantasy. Which then leads on to urban fantasy, which is another one you hear a lot of on Booktube, which I first heard it and I was like, I don't really know what that means, but again I figured it out for myself. Basically, City of Bones, Percy Jackson sort of thing. So when you have creatures like vampires and werewolves, but they are based in like cities and real life situations, but Harry Potter's still quite like cottagey and nice and kiddie, whereas urban fantasy is more like New York but with werewolves and things like that. So City of Bones is a really good example of that.
The next one is pretty weird to explain because it may be different where you live if you don't live in the UK. It's middle grade, and we would say middle grade is if you walk into Waterstones, you get your primary school kiddie books, and then you get your like 7 to 12, where you're not a primary school kid anymore, but you're not a young adult yet. You can't read books that have more mature themes in young adult fiction. So 7 to 12 is kind of like that middle age. But in America it might be more of a 11 to 13, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, but basically on Booktube someone says middle grade. Think of like How to Train Your Dragon, the start of Percy Jackson. Those more like, they're like children's books but not like little kids. Number 10 is Instalove. This is one that you might expect in some YA fiction. Basically when two characters meet and within, I know, like 10 pages a chapter they are like properly in love. Yeah, I can't think of a book that does this. Maybe Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi, if you've read that.
City of Bones does it.
Yeah, just basically, you know, there's no real development of the relationship. They just kind of meet, love at first sight, are obsessed with each other.
Tom
Instalove.
and Thingamabobby.
Alice from Spooks. Wait, no.
No, Tom from Maze Runner.
Yeah.
And Teresa.
Yeah, they're just like, we have a connection. We must love each other. It's just, that is a bit irritating. When people talk about Instalove, it's normally when they're criticising a book they've just read.
Number 11 is Reading Slump. Me and Laura have these. I'm currently in one.
So am I.
A reading slump is basically where you love to read and you read quite a lot, but then you just hit like a roadblock. It usually comes after you've read a really boring book, like I read James Joyce's Dooblydoo.
Or a really good book. You can read such a good book that you can't read anything else because nothing can compare.
I did that with Maze Runner. I finished Death Cure and I couldn't read anything else for ages because I was like, nothing's going to live up to that. I was also like, I hit City of Heavenly Fire. Yeah. But reading slumps are a very, very bad thing because you love reading, but you just can't seem to read.
You just don't even want to pick up a book. You just like...
And when you do, it seems like you want to be doing something else.
Yeah, or every book you try, you would probably normally enjoy them at other times, but at that moment you're just like, nothing you pick up you're enjoying to read.
You're just not in the mood for anything.
Number 12 is basically the opposite to a reading slump, and that is a read-a-thon. These tend to be properly organised events. A well-known one is like the Booktube Summer Read-a-thon that gets a lot of publicity, which we're really excited to do, our first one this year. But yeah, it's an organised event over a specific amount of time. There'll be like 24 hours or a week, Christmas, that kind of thing, where you just read as much as possible. So you might set up a TBR for your read-a-thon and read lots of YA. So all these words can all combine into each other. But yeah, you just try and read as much as possible. Like, everyone sets their own targets. And yeah, it's just a specific amount of time where you read every hour of every day.
A reading sprint is, this was just new to me. Laura's like explaining this to me now. I've never heard of this, but it sounds really cool. Basically, it's where you go on Twitter and like an established booktuber is going to give you enthusiasm and encouragement to just read quick.
Yeah.
And they'll say, don't check Twitter until you've read another 50 pages, or what's your favourite character, or do this in this time. And it just sounds really nice.
Yeah, it's really good for read-a-thons when you maybe get to like day 3 and you kind of slump in and not in the mood, and then you can do a reading sprint or a Twitter sprint and like get back into it. The next one is a read-along. This is different to a read-a-thon. A read-along is when a specific booktuber, maybe a group of booktubers, will say, this month I'm going to read this, you know, you guys can join me. And then there tends to be, they'll do a live stream video on YouTube where they chat about it, or maybe they'll have a book club page where people can talk about it. So yeah, it's just when someone says, read this book with me if you want, and we can all read it together. It makes it more fun.
The next one is Dooblydoo, or down bar, or down below, or in the comments. Yeah. It's basically just the box down there, or it used to be over there, or over there. It's just the comment bar on the page where you just write stuff that everyone else can see.
The last part of this Booktube Jargon video is Goodreads. You might hear this a lot. You may know what it is, but we thought we'd introduce it just in case. It's basically a website where you can organise your books, log your books. It's like Facebook for books. It'll come up like, Amy has rated this book 3 stars, and I can like that or comment that. You have shelves where you can organise your books. It's a really helpful way to just keep track of what you're reading, when you're reading, all that sort of thing. So a lot of booktubers have a Goodreads and they'll say, add me as a friend on Goodreads, or check out my Goodreads, and that tends to be in the Dooblydoo below.
So we hope that helps if you're new to booktube or you just wanted some like terms clearing up. Like, I definitely needed some of those. So subscribe and comment if you like this video, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.